I work with Baker Ripley, which is a Houston-based nonprofit, and I've been here for yes 2.5 years now, and started using Tableau. This is my first data analyst role, data analyst there, and I had done a programming boot camp to get into it. We focused on Tableau there, so that's kind of where I got introduced to Tableau, and then also used it at my agency, and so I've been getting a little more skilled with it, and really enjoy these Tableau user groups, getting to hear different perspectives from people in all different fields and all over the country. So, and I'll let the co-host Ming Yu introduce herself real quick.
Thank you, Travis. Hi, everybody. My name is Mingyu Lu. I'm also working for a nonprofit organization called United Way of Greater Houston. I'm not sure whether you guys are familiar with United Way. It's a national brand, international brand. We have centers all over the world, but most centers are in United States, and my center is one of the biggest one here. I'm very proud, and this is my, I think, sixth year working with Tableau. I learned Tableau through my previous job, working as a university research analyst. Is such a fun tool to learn to use. So it's my great pleasure to lead this user group with Travis. And I'm really looking forward to having a great session with you guys to learn together from Karinna's great presentation, I'm sure. So I think I'm gonna hand it over to Karinna to let her talk a little bit more about herself and also start her wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Mingyu. Thanks, Travis. So good afternoon. My name is Karinna Spitalnik. I'm an analytics consultant with Interworks, and I'll tell you a little bit about Interworks in a minute. I know a lot of you, this is your lunch hour, so feel free to get settled with your lunch. But I want to ask you to close down your other applications. You signed up for this because you probably thought, hey, I've got something to learn. So it's good to learn with no distractions. Maybe grab a piece of paper and a pen, take some notes while I'm talking. Right now, it's a decently small group. There's about 12 of us. So if you'd like to come off mute at any time or ask a question in the chat, I'll keep my eye on it as best I can. We'll also have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So that's why I recommend having just a notepad and paper. And I want you to just consider one question you've already asked today. Could be any question to anyone. Pop that in the chat. I'm going to do it too. Insight into my day. Okay, good. So I know people already put their name and where they're from in the chat. If you didn't get to do that yet, feel free to put your home base, your sort of industry and role, and then that question, any question you've asked today. I asked, did you pack your lunch? I have a middle schooler and a high schooler, and frequently my middle schooler will forget to pack lunch. So that's like an everyday question for him. I'll see some questions come in. What are your business questions? I was asked to create a results report. Okay. You select nursing as a major. We're doing some conversational questions here. Wait for a couple more to come in. You can't think of any questions you asked. A nice little thing to just pop in the chat is, what is your current coffee shop order? If you're anything like Atlanta right now, you're cold. I think everywhere in the United States is pretty much cold right now. So getting that afternoon coffee. Erica, I like yours. Why are you eating that to my pets? Oh, I have 3 dogs graded right now, so they won't cause trouble during this. Frequently, I talk to them during the day. I'm like, what are you eating? Why are you doing that? Where's my sock? Awesome. Did they respond with their new and notable? Also working on a report. Nice. Okay. Well, we're going to play a little game, get everyone kind of focused away from your workday. We're going to start with the game 20 questions. This probably won't take 20, but if you remember the game 20 questions, you can only ask yes or no, or you can only ask questions where I respond yes or no. So I am the person you're asking questions to. Again, you can put this in the chat or come off mute. But I'm going to have you guess a superhero, and not just any superhero. This is in the context of Marvel Universe. So go ahead, kick off a question. I will keep track and make sure we don't get to 20. We may have a little delay in the chat I'm seeing now. Okay, number 1. Who is the strongest? I can't say. I have to say yes or no. Ming Lu says, "Are you Wonder Woman?" No, she is DC. But good guess. Are you a scientist? No. Are they on a team? Yes. Am I human? Yes. Is Iron Man the strongest? That's a opinion. I'll answer that one later, but I do like where your head is, Rhonda. Think of 20 questions. You're trying to guess one person. So I'm human, I'm on a team, I'm not a scientist. Do you wear a costume? Yes, most times. So Erica, I like where your head is too. Ask me where I can say yes or no. She said, what gender do they identify with? So you could say, do I identify male? And I could say yes or no, or do I identify female? Yes or no. Do I have superhuman abilities? No. And I'll go ahead and ask the gender question. I identify as female in the comic books. Oh, Russ got it. Bing, bing, bing. It was Black Widow. I think when you don't have superhuman powers, that kicks it off, right? All right. Am I an adult? Mostly. So thanks for playing. Hopefully that got you kind of focused, not thinking about your workday, but now thinking about questions. So at Interworks, we kind of think there are 4 categories about what makes a strong question. And I'm going to go through this a little quickly right now. We're going to tap into all of these as we go through this presentation. But the first thing about questions is making sure, about strong questions, is making sure they're personal. And I don't mean like probing into someone's work life right away, but asking sort of personal, low risk, inviting questions. So asking you, what question did you ask today? Might have given me a little insight into your life or who you work with or what you do. Asking your favorite coffee shop order might give me just something to chit chat about that's not, how was your day? You wouldn't really jump into something too personal, like, what's your relationship with your manager like? Right? That might be a little too much, but personal enough that you're starting to get to know the people you're working with. The other thing we think strong questions do are they are specific. So specific can be setting a time frame, it can be a category, or it can be a feeling, right? So what area can I offer the most support this week is typically a question I will ask clients the beginning of the week during like a stand-up call. It's very specific. I'm not saying, what can I help you with for the rest of the length of this project? What's the priority for this week? We also think strong questions have a context. So I was just asking you the game 20 questions. Maybe you remember playing it as a kid, probably on a long car ride. And I gave you a very specific context. Superheroes, even more specific, Marvel superheroes. So if you're a geek like me, you already divided that into 2 groups. But asking questions in context means 2 things. You're sticking to the topic at hand, or you're guiding a question to help bring about an honest response around the things that you know to be important on a project or on an account. And again, I'm going to go through this a little more in depth later, but For example, I'm working on an internal project with our enablement lead. We're sort of updating some of our courses we teach. And I could tell that she was frustrated that our deadline kind of kept getting moved. We both had client work come up, things were getting pushed. So before the next check-in, I asked her, what's one thing that you'd like me to make progress on over the next 2 weeks? So it was very specific within the context of the next 2 weeks, what's a priority. And that helped her and myself feel like we were prioritizing tasks and things we could reasonably push forward in that time frame. We also think that strong questions are progressively complex. So this is a little more particular in dashboard creation, but the key here is listening, right? Taking time to process what the person is saying and synthesize, coming back with even more developed questions. And this is kind of what we do with data analytics and data visualizations, right? We're trying to get to the heart of the matter. We're trying to get to something specific that we can either represent visually or tell through a data story. So we want to quickly pinpoint a problem or a question and then start exploring solutions. So what we've learned at Interworks is this doesn't just happen through well thought out questions, although that's a big part of today's presentation, but it really starts with the relationship you build with your client or with your team members. So a little bit about Interworks. We've been working in data solutions for over 27 years. And our company really started with questions. Our owner, Bayfar, as a college student at OKF, Oklahoma State, he said, hey, how can I help like local schools get internet access? This is early 90s. Internet was still very sparingly provided. And that's really how our company started. We started as an integration company, IT solutions. Now we've, of course, expanded. We're in consulting. We do we've been a gold partner with Tableau for a long time, so that's one of our staple tools that we use. But we also ask questions like, how can we make clients happy? How can they enjoy working with us? How can we make our experience fun, but also professional? What are some tools that help our clients get faster insights with their data? One of our key questions we ask all the time. So to prepare for this presentation, I actually gathered some of our best people across Interworks. So some of our go-to-market, sales, engineers, architects, kind of had a nice variety of people. And the prompt that I gave them was, where did good questions get us? So where did good questions get us? So when we ask a good question, what was the result? And I've sort of took all those stories and broke them apart into 3 main categories, and that's kind of how I'm going to present today. I glanced over at the chat and saw, are you an adult? Yes, I'm still an adult today. Making sure we didn't have any questions on that first part. So I'm actually going to skip this because I want to just jump right into the presentation because we kind of just did a couple intros. But there's a book written by this man, Peter Drucker, called Questions Are the Answer. And it was it's a fantastic book. If you want to dive into asking good questions, this is a very easy read. But he had this quote in the book. He said, the important and difficult job is never to find the right answers. It's to find the right question. So there are few things as useless, if not dangerous, as to answer the wrong question, the right answer to the wrong question. And he gives a lot of examples of this in the book. But that's kind of where I want to start with this presentation. Those 3 topics were people first, the heart of the matter, and then questions in the weeds. This is going to be a little bit more dashboard centered on that last topic, but we're going to start with that people first. So if you've ever attended any of our other webinars, we offer a lot of free webinars that you can look on our website. But Jenny Parnell, our marketing director, she asks questions before, during, and after the webinar. Some of these questions are in the forms of polls, some of them are chats, some of them are surveys. but all of them are focused on us learning who our audience is and how we can best serve you. So right from the bat, before we offer any more services or look into new tools, we're always talking to people who are our current clients or prospective clients. And what Jenny will do is she'll compile these responses. Right now, she's got a fun AI program that she can run all the responses into, and it'll say, well, here's your top 4. Here's some themes I'm seeing. But it uncovers those top topics that are the most important to our clients. And what that helps us do is develop content and drive us to search out new solutions to further help our customers and to hear what they need. So we call these questions curiosity questions, right? The goal when you're asking a curiosity question is to be specific, but to be inviting. These types of questions are easy to respond to quickly. You don't have to think very hard if you're asking someone a curiosity question. And they may also be that low risk personal question, either to the individual that you're talking to, or perhaps to the business that you're talking to, or in some of your cases, the university. So when you're asking a curiosity question, throughout this presentation too, I'm going to talk about sort of the attitude and the perspective you need to keep in mind for yourself, because it's just as important what we say as how we say it. So with a curiosity question, you want to be attentive. So making sure you're on camera, you're trying to make eye contact. If you're in person, you're looking at that person. You have open arms. If we're asking questions and we're standing very cross-armed and cross-legged, we come across as we're not really wanting to listen to that person. We might even lean in. If we're in a big conference room, we may kind of lean towards the person who's talking, putting our arm on the table. I typically will let people know hey, I'm going to take some notes. So if I pause and don't respond to you right away, it's because I'm recording what you're saying and I really want to think before I reply. Oh, I forgot I had to click through these. Also think about that pausing is just as important, right? When we're talking to people, if we just have a list of questions we're asking them and we're not pausing to really think about what did they say, where am I getting them to talk more, where am I getting them to talk less, it's okay to take time and set that up even before the conversation starts. So, and this is the sort of empathy side, listening for their tone, watching their body language, right? If someone is suddenly stiff when you ask a question, they may be a little hesitant to reply. If someone gets excited and starts talking faster, then you know, oh, I've got them. They're excited about this. Also asking them to take away distractions. This is especially important in our virtual setting, right? I asked you at the very beginning of this, hey, close down your other windows, grab a piece of paper, get your lunch. You're inviting people to say your time is valuable, my time is valuable with you, and I want to engage you in that time. Perfectly fine to say, I'm going to take notes, or perfectly fine to say, hey, you seem distracted today. Maybe we should revisit this at a later time. Those are all empathy questions you can ask somebody if a conversation or if a conference room meeting isn't really going in the direction that's helpful. Because when you're saying, I recognize this is not productive time, let's make it productive later. And the other thing is that inviting piece, right? Think about how others might interpret your questions. So I love that earlier someone said, what gender do you identify with? It's very different than saying, are you a male or female? Because we do have some superheroes that are fluid. So thinking about, is my question too gender specific? Am I assuming something based on someone's role in leadership? Or would I want to respond to this question in front of my manager? So thinking about the situation that you're in will help you ask more inviting questions and making sure everyone feels included in that conversation. So some examples of curiosity questions that I like to ask frequently. Coffee shop one's a great one. People aren't really hesitant to share what do they order at a coffee shop, even if it's water. My husband will be like, he hates Starbucks. He doesn't drink coffee. We're both tea people, but he'll say, I pretty much order water every time I go. Guilty pleasure TV show, favorite fast food chain, the one thing I can help you with today. And if you have people who are very, you get on a call and they just want to talk about work and they just want to get through things, you can even gently encourage that by asking questions like, what are you feeling confident about in this project? Or what are you feeling hesitant or nervous about, right? You're taking time to really try to get to know them, even if they're somebody who may not want to talk about their personal life. You can get to know how they're approaching a project or a data problem. Right, so this is actually a funny little, so I'll tell you why there's a llama here. I was searching for images on Unsplash and just typed the word questions, like thinking I would find some fun questions, and this llama popped up, or curiosity, because he looks curious and he's peering through the fence. So he's my summary slide at the end of each of these. This is like your takeaway. If you're gonna really take away 3 main things today, write these down. But curiosity questions help you establish trust and help you learn the dynamics of a team. And taking time to do that will always get better answers later. This may seem like a tedious step or well, I know these people, I work with them all the time, but making sure you're asking questions around a specific topic. Remember, people are behind every part of the data cycle, right? People are a part of data collection, data cleaning, dashboarding, viewing the data. So making sure you know your client, your stakeholders, your audience will help you discern when and how to ask strong questions. These questions will kind of immediately give you and your client a similar goal, right? You're all trying to learn something new about each other and trying to learn something new about the problem at hand. Okay, heart of the matter. We're going to start getting into the actual weeds here. And I'm sure those of you who are in nonprofit space and university space are like, these may be the hardest questions to ask. So I'm going to start with a little story here. So like a lot of other analysts in the year 2020, sorry, I forgot to talk about this part of my intro. I used to work for Tableau. So I started, my background is in education. I was actually an art educator for 16 years in the state of Georgia. I got my PhD in art education. So I was teaching classroom and university. I was in Kennesaw for as an adjunct professor. And I switched to data and was a trainer with Tableau and then shifted into a consulting role, which I loved and still do today. But in the year 2020, I worked on a lot of COVID data, like a lot. Excuse me. Both on the disease side and the vaccination efforts. So this is a great example of asking questions to get to the heart of the matter while I was working on some dashboards for the state of Hawaii. And we were trying to build their vaccination dashboards. These are still active today. If you go to Hawaii.d, you can kind of explore them. They've changed a little bit from the ones that I first designed. We've kind of grown them over the years. And I'm not on that project anymore, obviously, but these basic dashboards were my babies. So when we started the account, we asked what a lot of consultants do on your first couple kickoff calls. How can we help? Right? What do you need? I'm going to pretend like I'm Hawaii. We need public-facing dashboards. We need to share vaccination rates with the state. Okay, what else? Oh, we need a server that can handle the data and is secure. They didn't have a hub for vaccination data yet. All right, great. What else? We need a tool that allows us to combine public data from pharmacies, government bases in Hawaii, because we don't have a centralized vaccine repository. Okay, what else do you need? We need that data to exclude any PII, and it has to be updated daily. Okay, anything else we need to know before we start on those priorities? They had a very specific list. Well, we have internal dashboards, but those are for our leaders to view, before they go public, but those can come later. Can you elaborate on that? Well, and this is the lead epidemiologist saying this, my biggest task every day is I've built some basic sheets with the data we need to verify before it goes public. And I cut and paste it into an email every day. And once all the leaders approve it, I push it to the public. He's like, and the sheets are pretty basic. Okay, this is an internal approval process. Oh yeah, it's not the best, we know. It sounds like this may be a priority before we build any external facing dashboards if they need to be approved by this team. Can you share these with me? These basic visits, and the guy was like, oh, these are terrible sheets. I don't even want, he was like embarrassed, right? He was a very newbie on Tableau. He didn't want me to see these sheets he built. He's like, oh, no. I said, well, these basic visits will help me understand, one, what your team has been seeing every day, and these are probably going to be more advanced than what the public needs, because he's sharing these with epidemiologists and disease center professionals. And then I told him, I was like, hey, by the way, you can use Tableau subscribe feature once we put this on your server, and you can, instead of having to screen grab and put this in an email and email it, anyone who has a subscription will just get this emailed to them every morning with pictures of the dashboard, and we can make them look like slides so they get 6 or 7 views. And then once it's more secure, they'll be able to log in, see the dashboard live, and click on it. So what happened here? First, our client had an idea of what they thought their solution would be, right? They're like, we just need to build this vaccination stuff. We need to get out to the public. And they came with those very specific priorities, which was fantastic. But we spent that first part of the discussion, and that was probably an hour and a half, like kickoff call, just listening, taking notes, and we kind of kept asking in different ways that what else? What else? What else? Right? It might have seemed annoying. I'm sure we didn't say it just like that. We, phrased it a little bit better. But the probing got us to their process, which turned out to be a critical piece before all the other things. And we ended that conversation where we could say, here's how we're going to add value immediately. We're going to build this internal dashboard that will be shared via subscription. We can approve those. And then once we get your server built, we can start on drafts for the public dashboards. So heart of the matter questions are ones that guide conversations around strategy, process, or the root of the problem. And those of you who are around my age, or maybe slightly younger or older, might remember the Tootsie Roll Pop commercial, which is why I have this picture, right? How many layers does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? How many licks? I think they used to be. How many licks? One commercial said 3, right? But this is what you're doing in this phase of questioning, right? You're trying to get to the center. And we're going to call these exploratory questions. These questions help you explore or gain insights into the past, present, or future perspectives. So with Hawaii, I was asking what has worked in the past? What's your current process, and where do we want to be in the future? So with these questions, the attitude you're trying to keep is to be inquisitive, right? There are no wrong answers here. You're not here to critique or to be like, wow, why didn't you guys think of that? Why are you copy pasting and sticking in the email? Didn't you know about the subscribe button? Right? You're not judging them. You're not ridiculing what they did in the past. You're just curious and inquisitive and asking more and more questions. I kind of just mentioned this next word. You're non-judgmental, right? You're trying to just get the lay of the land. These types of questions, you're also doing some keyword listening. So if someone says, this has been we've had this problem, or we're stuck here, or maybe you hear phrases like data management or filter, any kind of words that pop out, you want to take note of those and kind of dig deeper. And then the last thing you're going to do is paraphrase. So making sure you hear what they're actually saying, not just what they're trying to say to you to summarize, but what's really going on underneath that. So I'll admit, Hawaii was a little bit simple. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to switch that. Hawaii was simple probably because they knew it was a very specific thing they knew they were doing. But one technique I use when I'm doing scoping calls with a client, or maybe it's a kickoff call, or I'm just trying to get to know what the problem is or what the project is, I'm a very rigorous note taker, probably an outcome of my PhD days. But I take copious notes, and not just what's being said, but I'll take notes about the tone and the vibe I'm getting from clients. So I'll even like make a column down a page, and I'll like, what are they saying? And on the other side, what's their tone? So with Hawaii, I heard the tone of exhaustion in this leader when he said, I have to cut and paste this email every day, right? He was tired of doing it. He was a lead epidemiologist. It was a waste of his time, right? He was too smart and too knowledgeable and had too many other things to do than to be copy pasting an email every morning. So that was a place for me to insert my help and my problem solving skills, right? I knew I could take a significant part of his day that he was doing a mundane task and switch it into something that he could now deliver every day with ease. So what happens when a client or a stakeholder is not sure of their problem or of their solution? Right, I think one of you said you're on some, and start of the year, right? We're all doing Q1 planning. Let's make goals. So these are some questions that we like to ask frequently. And having a couple well-crafted exploratory questions in your back pocket can really come in helpful when you're having a tough conversation, or even when the conversation gets stumped. So Carl Redette is one of our go-to-market strategists, and here's a few that he finds helpful. One of the questions he likes to ask is, why are we doing this? So not just what are we doing, but why? And he also likes the second one on here that says, what happens if we don't do this? So when someone's proposing a solution or a tool, they're like, yeah, let's just put Tableau licenses in everybody and train them. And okay, what happens if we don't do that? What are we stuck with? How are we functioning? So gaining this type of context will help you as a solution maker, and will also help your audience voice what they need because they may not know. It'll also help you gain consensus, right? If you get to these questions about what's the why are we motivated? All right, here's my summary. So in case you were tuning out or eating your lunch or got distracted by Slack or Teams, don't be afraid of asking too many questions. There is value in reaching the core. And on that same note, it's always acceptable to say, I think we've reached our limit for today, especially if people are not having consensus or people get feisty in those conversations. I'm sure we've all been in those types of meetings. You can say, I think we're done with today. Let's visit this in a couple days. And then ask a couple questions you want people to think about in the meantime. You know, what is our alignment? What are your top 3 priorities? What are your team's top 3 priorities? What's one thing you're willing to let go of on this project? All helpful questions. Okay, now we're going to get in the weeds. So we're going to start talking about dashboarding and some other fun stuff. So in the chat, I'd like you to respond to this question. What is your biggest obstacle in dashboard development? If this is a part of your role, if it's not a part of your role, you can just say, what's your biggest obstacle in your data environment right now? Rhonda says stakeholders want way too much information. Oh yes. They want the Lord of the Rings dashboard, one dashboard to rule them all. That's a good one. How to make it clear, pretty, and include a lot of information. Okay. So in the design, making sure your design kind of matches your function. Working with containers. Oh, Sandrine. So I am actually writing a blog post about this. We have a very outdated one on our Interworks page right now. Like, it's probably from Tableau 10.1, the screenshots. I love containers, but there is a trick to working with them. So keep looking back. I will hopefully get this blog done, hopefully in Q1. Finding creative ways for interactivity. Okay. Travis is being reactive rather than proactive when it comes to creating new dashboard, making things based on ad hoc requests. Oh, yes. So the stretched timeline can happen a lot. Actually, Hawaii, that was one of the things we had to keep scaling back. These epidemiologists were like, we need to view this and this and this and this. I'm like, general public, 8th grade literacy. Like, that's how you have to think when you're providing dashboards to the general public. 8th grade literacy, data literacy, probably less than that. So you have to think, what do they need to know and how can I display it in the simplest, most effective way with the fewest clicks? I have a lot of stories about Hawaii. Anyway, let's stay focused in the weeds. So we look at dashboard development too as an iterative process, which not everybody does, and not all data analytics people look at it that way. So let's say you're working on a project and you can kind of like hands up in the chat or find an emoji that really helps you with your emotions here. Your stakeholders or your clients are pretty vague, and maybe they use some of these statements. Just show me the numbers. We just need to see X metric over time. Or the dreaded, ever dreaded, can you just replicate this spreadsheet? I want to see the emojis. I'll give my emoji. That's how I feel. Oh, that's really small. Kristen, that's great. Rhonda's crazy face. Yeah, if I could do like the crazy eyes, like the spiral eyes, I don't even know if that one's an option here. Everyone's got their own emojis. Or like the monkey. This one's probably pretty fair for me too. Just don't. So how do you dig deeper with questions when that's what your stakeholders say? Like, oh, just rebuild this, or just show me, just make a cross tab. So in the weeds, we want to get to questions that help us collect answers. So now we're in the process of, I need answers. I need specific answers with actionable steps. So we're trying to synthesize in this stage of questioning. So we call these actionable questions, right? These are the questions that help invite honest and helpful critique. So instead of broad, big picture questions like those we're using for scoping, actionable questions are specific, they're organized by category, and they often allow for a variety of responses. So when you're in this stage of dashboarding, so you've already sort of collected what is the big problem, what am I trying to solve for? Hopefully maybe you've gotten data, or you're in the process of data collection or data cleanup. Think about how you can use things like surveys, multiple choice, range of agreement. So scale 1 to 5, how important is this dashboard feature to you? They can be anonymous, or you can time people's responses. So only give them, if you're in like a conference room kind of setting, or you're having like a bigger team meeting, you can say, all right, you've got 3 minutes to answer these following 5 questions about this dashboard or about this wireframe. And here's how I want you to prioritize this. So these are questions that are around the following. So solutioning, right? Either you've developed something or you're in maybe a draft stage and you need to know, is this the solution we were planning for? Because if not, you go back to that iterative, let's ask more of the dig deep questions. Actionable questions are iterative. So you're not just going to ask them once and stop. You're going to keep going back, or you're going to have a process built in where you're asking questions, finding responses, and then maybe going back and confirming that these were the results they were looking for. We kind of build this in our dashboard process at Interworks, where after we've built something that's we think is a viable solution, it might not be designed to the best, it may not have the graphic look we're going for, but we might pilot it with the people who are going to use it to say, is this the right data? Is this in the right form? Can you understand the filters? Because before you polish it all up and really make it pop, you want to make sure it's working the way it should work. These questions would also have specific categories. So one technique I use when I'm doing reviews with clients or with stakeholders is I even give them a what's working well in the data, in the design, in the interactivity. So those are like my 3 categories. Is this the data we're actually looking for? Is this the design we need for the people who are using it? And then is this the interactivity? Is it too much? Can we do 5 clicks and get no data? But I want feedback on those categories, not just, hey, do you like this dashboard? Right? You never get anywhere with that question. Which goes to this variety of responses, right? You need to have ways that you tell people what's working well, what could be improved, what do we take away. Kanban boards are really nice for this type of questioning because you can have those categories set up and invite people to fill in their responses and then move them around, prioritize them. So what are the things we want to improve on this dashboard or change? You end up with 10, 8, maybe even 3. Now let's prioritize these. What's the one that's the most important? So my teacher comes out. I'm using my hands a lot, and I'm not even like in a room. So here are some sample questions that we ask in our dashboard development. I'm not going to read these to you, but if you want to, screenshot this, look at them later, or just kind of read them to yourself, I'm going to tell another quick story. So I was working on a project to enhance an old reporting tool for a quick service restaurant chain. I'm not going to say which one, but if you live in Georgia, you have only a couple you could guess from that we at Interworks work with. So the original report was very much a crosstab, like single report. Let's call it an eye-straining crosstab because that's what it was. And there were 7 metrics in it. And each of those metrics also had a ranking. So we were looking at locations of restaurants, and based on your metrics, so fast food chain, one of the things they're looking at is, average daily sales, average daily transactions. So let's rank our stores based on who has the most average daily sales and average daily transactions. So there were 7 rankings, 14 metrics in all on this crosstab. So if you're picturing this, look at those emojis. That's exactly how I felt, right? So they had already taken a stab at building this dashboard, and they got stuck partially on necessary calculated fields that would appropriately handle the ranks. Because on top of these 7 ranks, there was one rank that was taking all of the ranks, recalculating them together to come up with like a composite rank. And you can imagine how Tableau did not like that. I'm going to do a rank on a rank in a nested rank. Yeah. This is like the most complex dashboard I've ever built. Still in process, by the way. But anywho, so we had a few basic questions we asked at each stage of our dashboarding process. So that's what I have on these blue boxes. Anytime we're doing a project at Interworks, we go through these stages. We try to understand what the client's needs are, refine what it really is. This kind of helps with that. Rhonda commented, like, stakeholders want too much. They want, I want all this. Well, let's refine it, because effective dashboards are going to tackle 1 to 3 questions tops. you got more than 3 questions you're trying to answer in one dashboard, you should build separate dashboards or at least separate views, because most people can't focus on more than 3 questions or even 3 metrics, let's be honest, in a dashboard, unless they're related to each other, which this one kind of was. So one that helped guide this process of development for me was asking, what are the pain points on the audience side? I think I have this as like question 3 under understand. What is this data currently consumed? What are the current pain points? I should say, how is this data currently consumed? But so I said, hey, what's the pain points right now with this ginormous cross tab? And they said, well, they really can't see their rank quickly because there are all these tiny numbers, right? Like sales, rank, transaction, rank, blah, blah, blah. And they said that's really what these operators care about, is where is my store ranked? And I said, oh, okay, good to know. So I asked a couple follow-up questions in this define. And it turned out that the real goal of the dashboard was not to view these 7 metrics, but it was for the restaurant owners to go in, see where their restaurant ranked, but then also see who was ranked right above them and right below them, and to encourage them to reach out to those operators and say, what are you doing differently at your restaurant that I can improve? So the idea was supposed to be a little bit of competitive collaboration. And knowing that, I said, okay, well, would you be willing for me to run up some wireframes and completely change this design? Because if the important thing is the rank, then we can privilege that and make all these other things secondary. So luckily, what happened after that was we ended up being able to build this dashboard that now has these little like spotlight cards. And on the bottom has a bar chart, a very simple bar chart where your restaurant is highlighted and you can see who's above you and who's below you. And you can hover and see who's the owner, where the store is located, all the other metrics that are important. You can get a little snapshot of that. And then they can click an arrow and go to a more detailed report later if they want to. So far, it's been successful. I'm still troubleshooting some of the calculated fields, but we're already in that pilot stage. So this slide, this brings me to something else we do at Interworks, is we actually offer workshops about how we do dashboard design and dashboard production. Right now, it's called UCDD, User-Centered Dashboard Development. I am the owner of the solution. I'm the instructor, but we're updating it. So the name is going to be changing to Design Thinking for Data Visualization, because we also work with ThoughtSpot, which is not really dashboard designing per se, but a little bit more of asking questions in data, where we work with Power BI. We also work with a lot of data management tools. So we're shifting this a little bit to be more just data visualization. So no matter what your tool is, whether you use Tableau or not, you can get some, I can't think of a word to say. You can improve after going to this workshop. Let's just say it that way. But we kind of walk through that process. How do we help you understand, define, develop, refine, and then launch? So we kind of walk you through what is our Interworks process, how can you do it internally. It's a 8-hour workshop. We spread it out over 4 days. So if that's something you're interested in, feel free to write down the link here, click it out. Again, the name's going to change, but right now it's staying the same, but you can get an idea of what this workshop and if it might be helpful to your organization. So here are just some other actionable questions. I have tons and tons of these. I try to get to the ones that I think I ask the most. But these are ones I find myself getting the most out of. But I think what I mentioned at the very beginning about when you ask a question, how you're paying attention to how they respond, people get excited and talk fast, or they kind of stop and have to think. That's when you know, all right, maybe I have to rephrase this or dig a little more. So the last question here is the one I want to point out, because this is where I think sometimes we do a lot of planning in the early stages and then dashboard design and iteration, and all of a sudden we have to roll it out and we're like, crap, I don't have an implementation plan, or I'm not, how do I train people how to use this? especially if they're used to looking at a Excel spreadsheet. Now you built them this amazing dashboard, and they're like, ugh, I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet because I don't know how to do this. So we also take time in that course to talk about what are best practices around launching dashboards and then also revisiting them. So it's not set it and forget it. It's build it, use it, refine it, keep that very iterative process. So here's my in the weeds. Here's my llama. The more questions you ask, the more you simplify your work. This is one of those things that when I've spent a lot of time in that understand, define stage, I found that my work in building a dashboard is so much easier because I didn't waste a lot of time building something that then no one needed or didn't really hit the mark. All right, the final questions. So I want you to think about, and you can kind of raise your hand in the chat or just put a little note. Do people remember playing the game Guess Who when they were younger? And you had like the cards of the people set up. Now they have like a billion different versions of this. We actually owned a marble Guess Who for our boys when they were little. You can just kind of put an emoji like, yes, I remember playing Guess Who.
Yeah, with all the different careers on it, I think you had to like flip them up or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then they had some things like people wearing glasses. You could say, "Are you wearing glasses?" And if they say no, you could flap them all down. And luckily they've evolved them. I looked at like some early Guess Who images because I was going to use it here, and not much diversity, lots of dudes, not a lot of women. Now they're luckily shifting the game and making it so kids see themselves in the game, which I love. But yeah, as a former arts educator, anytime I look back on, oh, Kristen says they have pets now too. That's cute. I would love to pretend to play Guess Who as a pet. But I look back in those childhood games and I kind of have that critical lens. Like, what did we really learn? Right? So that game of Guess Who, you're learning deductive reasoning, right? Eventually you learn to ask broad questions first, like, are you a male or female, or do you identify as male or female? And that way you could knock down, all those people who didn't match the response. Then you would scope your questions, right, to get to that narrow pool of people quickly. And we'd shift after that to be more specific, pointed questions. There was actually a funny Instagram post someone sent me when I was preparing for this presentation, and I was, talking to a lot of people internally. And these younger millennials were playing Guess Who, but they weren't asking anything about their physical features. It was like assumptions you made about the character. Like, would your person talk to me about cryptocurrency? And they're like, oh, absolutely. And then knock them down. Or are the parents proud of this person? They're like, well, I kind of want to be. I mean, it was hilarious. But of course, you're assuming based on looks what these people might do for a living or what these people their attitudes might be. It was very entertaining. But what you're actually doing in Guess Who is deductive reasoning. And then it's also, you're building inferences via constructivism. This is my educator voice coming out. Constructivism means you're making connections between your experiences and the new information. And we do this all the time as data analytics people, right? We have experiences, we have new information, we are trying to construct new knowledge or a new way of representing that knowledge and building inferences based on that, making decisions about business, about education, about our nonprofits. So this whole point of this presentation, right? How do I get better at this? How do I get better at asking questions? So honestly, I can tell you it is progress, not perfection. You attended today's TUG, so go you. You've got this presentation. It's got recorded. Hopefully you took some notes. We'll do some Q&A in a minute. continuing your own education is so important. I mean, I completely shifted careers by continuing my own education, so it's fun where it takes you. Attending seminars. If you can make it out to Tableau conference, I highly recommend that experience. It's a blast. One of the best professional conferences I've ever been at in my life. Number 2, collect resources. So I'm going to give you a resource today. Travis and Mingyu, I found the one from your previous presentation from Danny on my team. He's going to send that to me today. But I got a little one pager that I can send out to Travis and Mingyu, and they can email you guys a copy of it. And then the third thing, and this might sound tedious, and some of you are like, I don't really have to do this, is to practice and document. And by document, I mean like write down what works and what doesn't. And this will be different for every project and client, but those copious notes really do help me when I'm in this process of either developing a dashboard or working with data. So taking time to do that step is important. Sorry, it is so dry in my basement and I'm very thirsty. Hopefully it's giving you time to think about what I'm saying. All right, so I'm going to call these back pocket questions. And back pocket questions, this is something I picked up my very first years teaching way back in 2002. But I had a mentor that she would say this to me. She reminded me to collect tools that are useful and have them ready to go. So that's a back pocket question, something that's useful, ready to go. And at the time, it meant questions around like classroom discipline and organization and time management. But I'm also a cyclist. I have the Silver Comet Trail here in Georgia. It's a old railroad that they paved that goes from Georgia to Alabama. So I can actually ride my bike for 121 miles if I wanted to, and then turn around and come back. So there's a lot of back pocket things in your shirt. If you're a cyclist, you have these weird pockets in the back. And just like as a cyclist, I had to find like, what are the right snacks for a long ride and the right gel packs and which water bottle actually fits. You got to do the same thing for your question asking. So what are some questions to have in your back pocket when you're asking questions? And the things about a back pocket questions, you're just collecting a ton of them, try them out. You're taking time to critique. Did it work? Did it not work? Sometimes you'll have a question that always gets everyone talking. You're like, oh, I should ask that again. And then building up something that works for you. So combining different questions, combining different techniques. I started using this technique as a trainer when I worked for Tableau. I would watch other trainers like during my ramp time, and I would just write down every single question they asked. Partially because I came from education and I didn't even know things like, what does KPI mean? I'd never heard those initials my whole life. And everybody in business is like, well, we have these KPIs. And I was like, what is a KPI? But I repeated them. So I would ask my audience the same questions the other trainers were asking. Some became my staples. And some evolved as my teaching evolved. So the more I learned about business, the more I learned how to change those questions. My recommendation, or our recommendation as InterWorks, because I talked with a bunch of people to do this, is to create time to reflect after you do any question session with your clients or your stakeholders. So keeping a running document of categories and questions that work. Make a list of do not ask this or do not ask this to this person. It will make them mad. Some ones I always have on my list. When did they seem stumped? When did I have to probe deeper? When did they get excited? When did they tune out? Those are 4 I always reflect on after I'm done with a question session. All of those things will help you kind of refine your skills and develop better, stronger questions. And then collecting the how part of asking the question is always a good thing to think about. Like, can you ask a question before a meeting or presentation? to give them time to think about their answers. So when I was working on my PhD, the dirty little secret in higher ed, and some of you may agree or disagree with this, but if you move on to higher ed and you didn't have experience in K-12 education, is that they can't really teach you how to teach in higher ed. They just assume you know how, right? They hired you, you have a higher ed degree, they're like, have at it. So that's the dirty little secret of higher ed. Here's the dirty little secret of asking questions. And we saved it for last here. Sometimes the best questions aren't questions at all. So they might be things like, tell me more. Elaborate on this. Help me understand. And if someone says something that's a little off, or maybe a little demeaning, or a little raises your red flags, I love this statement. I use it quite a lot. You said this for a reason, and I'd like to know why. It's a very polite way to deal with somebody who might be aggressive or thinks they know the answer, or maybe wants to tell you what you should be doing instead of actually being a part of the questioning process. You said this for a reason. I'd like to know why. And as a woman in data, I've had to use that question quite a bit. Some of you probably relate to that, but sometimes you get questions where you're going, did you really need to ask that to the man in the room or to me? So switching it around, try not to be defensive, trying to still keep that inviting atmosphere going. That's one of my back pocket questions now. And even if you're the quiet one in the room, I know a lot of us in data are introverts. I am not. My husband is, though. You're usually focused on listening. And you can still get good at asking questions because you'll be the one to give people time to respond and time to process. So that's when taking those notes and thinking, what it is do I really want to say? And even to say, I'm not sure what I want to ask you now, but I will follow up with some questions. Perfectly acceptable. You're still listening. You're still trying to be in tune to what they need, but it's okay to say, I'll get back to you. So last llama of the day, the best may not be questions at all. So get good at listening. All right, just kind of sharing some of our vendors. It's just a fun slide to throw up, but we are a Tableau Gold partner, so we will be at InterWorks or at a conference. I don't know if I will be there. I'm hoping I will be, but always a crapshoot who gets to actually go. I think it's in San Diego this year. And we can open up for some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks so much, Karinna. That was great. Well, I feel like I'm really going to have to step up Q&A. Have some questions that are a little better than what I was originally thinking. So
that's all right.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to ask?
I have maybe a quick question. I'm thinking while I'm talking. So first of all, I want to thank you, Karinna, for the great presentation. It's very inspiring. So when you talk about I think the part is in the weeds. You mentioned a dashboard. If we want to make it efficient, it shouldn't answer more than 3 questions. You shared it, I believe it, we can do it, but with our stakeholder, with bosses and supervisors, is there a magic word or magic sentence, or is there a way to kind of get them on board? Because they meanwhile they want to show all information, and especially they have their own boss, they have their audience, so they want to share more. So I wonder, are there any tips or experience stories around that you want to share?
I wish there was a magic word or magic answer. I think for me, what's worked the best is, again, taking that time to really learn the people. So I was actually working with an organization. Actually, I think I'm okay to share them. I think they're fine knowing that they work with Interworks. We work with AARP, and they do a lot of internal data, tracking what they, things different vendors they work with. And we were building something that was brand new, completely brand new. And I was working with like 2 stakeholders, but the key stakeholder was left out of that conversation. So we spent a lot of time building, thinking we were answering all the questions. And it turned out that person's just Tableau knowledge was very low. They had never really used the tool. They knew a lot about the data, and they knew a lot about the problems we were asking, but visualization was scary. So in that situation, taking time to like slowly introduce something that you might know is a best practice and saying, hey, this may not be the solution you're looking for, but let's try it. Like, let's take a week, click on this dashboard, get to know it. We're not going to roll it out to your whole company yet, but I want your input. So really making it personal to the people who are working for it and saying, I just want you to try it to see if this is getting your answer faster or this is more efficient. Taking a little bit of time to like give them a chance to practice, especially if it's something new or you've been building something for a while and they haven't really had their hands on it. Helping like close that gap of knowledge and efficiency takes some time, and even building that into the process of dashboard design. So rarely do I hand someone a dashboard that's like finished and say, okay, try this. We even use Figma as a design, like conceptual design tool. And there's ways now that you can make it interactive. And we'll give people a very detailed wireframe, no real data, because that's the other thing I've seen is if you give someone a dashboard that has their real data, the first thing they want to do is check to see if it's right. Instead of checking for, does this work the way I want it to work? Is it answering the question I need? Is it easy to follow, right? We had like a 5-3-1 rule with dashboard building is in the first, or 5-3-5, sorry, 5-3-5. The first 5 seconds, you should be able to see what this dashboard is about. The first 3 minutes, you should be able to gain insight. And then 5 minutes, you should be able to ask more questions. I think that's what it is. Yeah, 5-3-5. And that's a hard thing to do, but it comes with like giving someone a mock-up first, a wireframe, having those conversations, like building your users throughout. That's one of our like slogans for our user-centered dashboard design is users first and users throughout. Because if you just get them one time and then you spend all this time alone developing and you're like, here it is, and they're going, oh, that's not really what we were talking about. Now you've got to go all the way back to square one instead of going, okay, here's what we're thinking would work. What do you guys think? Okay, yeah, but this is a little too much or this is not enough. Okay, let's come back and do that. Like you have the people all the way throughout the process, not just at the beginning and end.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
You're welcome.
I think we have a great question here from Jen in the chat. It says, are there any risks to seeming like you don't know what you're doing or you're not the expert if you ask too many questions? Or do your clients always appreciate being asked?
Jen, that's great, because obviously someone who I entered data, I'll stop sharing my screen. I entered data as a new career. And so there were a lot of my first consulting gigs where I had no idea what they were talking about, right? None at all. One of my first clients was actually another COVID like state. Tableau, we were building COVID dashboards, and I was in on a meeting with the governor of that state. Being like, we need to build these COVID dashboards. And they're talking about infection rate and blah, 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 blah. I had no idea what any of the metrics were, how to calculate them, nothing. And I sat and listened for a while, just let them talk. And I said, so I'm the new person on this account. Of course they knew I was new. They just hired us. I'm the new person. And I would just say, help me understand if I'm hearing you right, or help me understand if this is what you mean. And letting them repeat it and letting them know I'm not an expert in disease or epidemiology or any of that. I'm an expert in building visuals. I'm an expert in listening, translating your problem, and then building a solution. But that solution is never the same for two clients. So even as an expert in building a solution, I'm not building the same thing for everybody. I'm not even cleaning the data the same way, right? But I am listening and trying to find the best solution for that client. So I think if you enter any sort of meetings that way, and there's a really good book, it's called Getting Naked. It's actually a business consulting book. I know when you say it, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think I have it over here in my drawer. Very short and a super easy read. The story is meh. I kind of, as a woman reading it, was like, ugh. But at the end of the book, they kind of give advice about how to be a good consultant in anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be data. I think they were financial consultants. But one of the concepts is when you are okay saying, I'm not the expert, but I will ask the questions and I will reach out to other experts, people will appreciate that because they know, wow, if this person's honest with me about what they can and can't do, I can trust them, but they're not going to try to sell me something I don't need or build me something I don't need. They really are listening to me. So I think I would never go to a meeting and say, I'm not the expert, but I would say, hey, I'm new to your data, because I am. Walking into COVID, I was new to that data. I'd worked with hospital data before, but it was nothing like COVID data. And then I was on another account where I was looking at, HR data, which I could kind of wrap my head around, but I was like, tell me what's important about this data to you. And it's totally fine to do that. Hope that helps. Sandrine, I see a question. Yeah.
Yeah, another question from Sandrine in the chat. What should be the best approach if I'm working with data that has discrepancies? Move on with the dashboard or work on something else with accurate data?
Could you be a little more specific about the discrepancies? Because I don't see how I answer this question.
Yeah, let's say that maybe if you are trying to compare maybe the data from different data sources, let's say from the UDM using Google and from the software, like for HR perspective, when you try to, how can I say, to compare the two sources, the dates or maybe the data are not matching. So in that case, what should be the best approach?
So typically you'd want to try to do some data cleansing where you're either validating the data from one source or another to see which one is more accurate. We use a couple tools. I've used Tableau Prep before to either combine data sources or at least compare and see like where am I finding nulls. Anytime I'm seeing something alarming, I would reach out to the client right away. So in this case of the fast food chain, we actually are combining multiple data sources that have different date values, one's at a daily level, one's at a monthly level. So anytime I would see significant nulls or restaurants that just didn't have data in that building process, I would go back to them and say, how do you want me to handle this? Like, do you want me to exclude these? Do you want me to group them so that we just see everything that's maybe inconsistent? And because you'd want to include that in your analysis, right? If I just chose to exclude it because it made the dashboard look better, I might be excluding something that is really pointing towards a problem that they would want to know. So, for example, I was working with a school actually taking their grade reports and turning it into a visual. And there were some significant date issues where they were supposed to be testing a kid on one day and then testing them a year later. And then we were going to report, the change, like here's how your kid did on the test. And we had hundreds of values missing or the dates were off. And so I said, hey, like, this is what I'm seeing. What do you want me to do with it? And like, oh, no, build it in the dashboard. We want to see that this is how many teachers were not administering the test in the right date frame. And then we ended up building a whole separate dashboard that was tracking the teacher's test administrative day frames because they wanted to get that window closed. Like, we want to be consistent because it looks better for the state. So I would always track it, let people, let your stakeholders know, this is what I'm seeing. How do you want me to handle it? And then sometimes having a solution ready, like, here's what would happen if I excluded this data, or here's what would happen if I grouped this and just showed you anomalies separately, and let them decide what do they need.
I really thought it was interesting when you were talking about taking notes on people's tone and affect. Like, I always think about taking notes on what they say. I don't know, and I kind of just internalize how they were acting. I don't ever write that down, but that would actually be really helpful to really quantify there in your notes and go back and look at it. But yeah, I think most of my questions were around getting how you get practice at it, how you find examples and resources and come up with, like you were talking about, back pocket questions. I was kind of curious for you, do you feel like you honed these skills more as in your career as a data analyst, or did you pick them up as an art instructor or in art or higher education?
That's a great question. I think a little bit of both. I think, when I first started in data, I definitely struggled with like imposter syndrome, right? Like, do I really know this? Am I good at it? Someone's going to know I'm a phony. But I think I had enough people I surrounded myself with that I was like, hey, I want to be good at this. So teach me. So I started with instructors, and then I would shadow other consultants as well. I would just ask, hey, if I had downtime, can I sit in on a client call and just listen, just so I could learn how to do it better? So being open to those types of situations, especially like this time of year, like January and then summertime and then like December, work's typically slow. You might be wrapping something up or starting something, but it's a great time to shadow people. And if you're in an organization where that's invited, I think people realize that you're not doing it to really learn about the client. You're doing it to learn about the technique, right? And I would ask other people, hey, who do you look up to, or who do you emulate? Like, we still need role models in our lives as adults. So I found a couple people at Tableau conference that I just loved how they presented and how they led conversations and questioning. So I would see if they had, a blog or a channel, or I'd reach out to them on LinkedIn. So kind of surrounding yourself with people that do it well was one thing I did. And then the other thing I did was thinking about how I asked questions to get kids to talk was not that different. Like, I would come in a conference room with leaders and kind of do the same probing I would do with kids, but just different questions. And I think my technique shifted a little, because obviously when I was teaching like kids art, it was more about it wasn't too different. I was trying to get kids to talk about art, like really look at a painting or a sculpture and like, what are the feelings behind it? What's the story? What's the history? And so I'd be like pulling these questions out of kids. And it's the same kind of thing in getting people to talk about their business life or their data. Like, how do I pull questions out? So context, getting to know them, knowing what got them excited or what got them bored or what got them irritated. I think those parts of question asking helps you read the people. So kids the same way, when they're frustrated or fidgeting, they're not paying attention. Same with adults. If they're like on their phone or clicking around, they're not paying attention. So you can stop and say, hey, was this a good time to talk? Can we come back to this later? And oh, no, we have this meeting. Let's get it done. You're like, okay, pay attention to me. So I think I just kind of crafted it. I also love talking to people, and I love presenting. And I've always wanted to keep my job fun. So even when I presented at Tableau conference, like I did one of the desktop one sessions. There's like 500 people in the audience, and I could tell the room was like slowing down, right? It was like after lunch. I think I had to talk about LODs right after that. And I thought, oh my God, people are just gonna tune out. So I made everybody stand up, and I did this stupid like call and response thing that you do with little kids, like to get them to pay attention and get their wiggles out. I was like, I'm gonna do this with these 500 data analysts. And it worked, and they loved it. And I like risked embarrassing myself, but later on when people were doing the surveys, they were like, oh, Karinna made it so fun, and she actually got us moving, and I was able to pay attention. And so I think like using my techniques as a teacher has always helped, but paying attention to people and putting people first above the work has really been the thing that's guided me the most, is being able to see where are people most frustrated, where are they most excited. Like those things really do help you work on a project, and then you can come back and be like, hey, remember that thing you said you were frustrated about? And they're like, oh, you remembered that? Yeah, I built it into the workbook, and now it does this. And they're like, oh my God, and then they get excited because what you built is what they needed. So
Yeah.
Rhonda says, as a data analyst, should I take a course in graphic design? I would say yes, only because I'm an art background, and I think it really does help, because graphic design is a lot about designing for people. There's a lot of free stuff. And actually, Rhonda, we have a design team at Interworks that works with us when we're building dashboards. So we have some professionals that help us as well. We have a whole series on designing better dashboards. As a graphic designer, like our graphic designers came up with the series. So if you check out our blog, Rhonda, we've got a couple free resources there that might get you started. But yeah, I would highly recommend it.
Hey, well, thanks so much, Karinna. I definitely learned a lot. I'll be rethinking all of my question asking from here on out, and I'll probably be walking around with a notepad in my back pocket to start writing stuff down. But yeah, that was really helpful, and we really appreciate you being here with us today.
Yeah.
And,
I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. And
great talking with everyone, and enjoy your weekend.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for attending. We'll wrap up the recording and try and send out the recording and Karinna, if you're able or would like to provide your slides, would love to send those out as well. And yeah, feel free to reach out, and we'll see you at our next meeting, which is not scheduled yet, but we'll let you know.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a great one, everyone.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. It was a good meeting.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. I'm just waiting for her to share her slides. Danny still hasn't shared yet.